What is up to all the difference makers out there? Okay, we just spoke for like 15 minutes, I think, Grant, right? We were like, and I'm like, this needs to be recorded. This conversation is going to be so incredible. I don't even have much of an intro other than this is going to be a fun ride. And what we're just kind of talking about and sharing is I've known our guest, Tiffany Turner, for how long have you been at Grit?
3 years.
3 years.
Because it was during the pandemic. I was in and out during the pandemic.
Yeah. So we've crossed paths for about 3 years now. And I remember it's probably been about 2 years now because you were doing therapy.
Yeah.
And then you were like, hey, I'm thinking about going into this coaching thing. And I've seen kind of what you're doing. You had a couple questions. And then now it's probably been about 2 years.
So a year and a half, July.
Okay.
Last July.
Okay. So this is going to be an awesome conversation, but what's really fun is outside of this 15 minutes that we just went deep, that I know there's going to be so much value to listen into this conversation. So I'm telling you right now, buckle your seatbelts, get the popcorn, go on the nice long ride, get the workout in, whatever you're doing. Just get ready to listen to Tiffany because we have some really outside of the box fun stuff to talk about. So Tiffany, welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's so awesome because we've crossed paths, but we've never sat down. We've never had an in-depth conversation. And then just like that, we're like going and I'm like, oh my God, my brain's firing. I have so many different directions we can go. So, kind of what you were just talking about, though, and to allude what I was talking about as far as going in that therapy route and doing the like kind of in the box. This is the way that we fix people. Kind of like this is the route that you go to kind of making this transition. Tell me about that.
So, I have a background in social work, mental health. I've actually had an odd path to getting to this point. I did wilderness therapy out of grad school. I worked in a girls' detention center in Indiana before grad school. I worked in schools during grad school. And then in Oregon, after wilderness therapy, I did that for a year. I started working in the hospital system, and it's very traditional but fast-paced. And so then I came back to Michigan because my husband and I wanted to be closer to our families. And I got a job at a hospital because that's what you do. Because you have student loans to pay. And I had the right experience, and I had done 7 years there, and I loved the world of mental health. But what I was treating was crisis, inpatient, medical, all the unexpected things. I always say I'm the one who explains all the things that the doctors don't. They come in and give you the medical diagnosis, and then I'm the one who says, okay, this is what it means, right? Or call people at St. Joe's. I called people from if they were in a car accident. So I'm the one who comes in and gets your family's phone number, or things like that, or takes your phone and looks through it. And calls family so that you're not there by yourself, And so I had this really unique job that I loved so much, and I just kept thinking there's got to be more. So I started an outpatient and absolutely loved it. And then I developed a program because, again, I'm like, I want more. I developed a program for primary care offices where we put social workers directly in the office as care managers to hit the ground running. And there was this new wave of it happening all over the country, but nobody was really doing pediatrics. And I had a history in pediatrics, so I was like, throw me in a pediatric office. We'll see what happens. And I found it so thrilling and just invigorating to be able to sit in the room next to the pediatricians, and a kid comes in and says, I'm depressed, or I'm struggling with this, or gets a new diagnosis of diabetes or something like that, and they're struggling. Well, those doctors don't have enough time to do all of that and give them time to process. So they could say, hey, we've got this social worker right here. And so it helped just break down that stigma of like, we're part of a team. It's not this other thing, right? There's medical and there's mental health. And so, sorry, I'm a hand talker.
I am too.
It's genetic. But there, and so I really decided to start pushing that. And then a friend of mine who was doing the same thing, we decided to go fully into outpatient. And then I found more barriers, right? So like every kind of push I made to stretch those boundaries of what traditional mental health is, where all this stigma, right? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. There's one with Angelina Jolie in it, which I can't remember. but
Is it Girl Interrupted?
it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
for some reason it just
So
popped in my head.
like these very, very harsh stigmas about mental health and what mental health is. And the reality is most of us have been depressed. Most of us have felt anxiety. Now, almost all of us have felt anxiety after these last few years. But, you know, I found these barriers specifically with athletes, which I played college ball. I played college soccer. That clear. I'm only 5'4", so basketball was never an option for me. But you know, I saw all of that going through, and people have career-ending injuries and all of these things. And then you look as an adult, and there's these other athletes, endurance athletes. I have a friend who is an open water swimmer, and she's swimming the English Channel, and she's doing all of these things. And her and I were talking, and it's, you get these career-ending injuries. Well, just like during the pandemic, all your coping skills were gone because you couldn't work out, and what you thought was your life, and when you'd given up so much. But there's a huge stigma against mental health. I mean, you look at the last Olympics and what happened, and how it's looked at whenever an athlete, and there's plenty of organizations now who are working to kind of reverse that, but it's taking years, and you still have it at the high school level and other levels. And
Because they're performers, right? They're not a person, they're performers.
Absolutely. And that's my whole thing with the coaching is like focusing on you as a person, not a performer. And we know by focusing on you as a whole person, all of us are whole people. Like emotions drive us every day. They keep us from sleeping. They cause us to eat things that maybe we wouldn't otherwise eat. Like they drive us all the time. So how to be aware of that and then use it to your benefit. So athletes, physicians, entrepreneurs, business owners, right? The people who I call elite mindset, they are the best of the best in their business. Who do they go to for help? And what happens if there's a internet, I'll say glitch, where their records are exposed and they have a mental health diagnosis and it gets leaked to the media and then it gets leaked to the social media and you can't take it back. And so now their career is defined by this when they worked their whole life to protect it. And it's really hard and heartbreaking. So you have athletes in really high numbers committing suicide, attempting suicide, because they don't want to get help. They don't know how. It's not encouraged. Toughen up.
Yeah.
Suck it up.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, I remember when I was playing high school soccer, our goalie broke her finger and her dad came out on the field and taped them together and was like, it's still going to be broken at the end of the game. Get out there. And I think of that now and I'm like,
how damaging is that?
Right. Like toughen up, right? Stop crying, toughen up. And there's a time and place for that because there's some things it's more damaging to let kids escape from, especially when it's related to anxiety and other things. But what if we just said, that's okay. You're allowed to have a bad day. And physicians and medical staff, nurses, we just went through this huge pandemic where they were stretched beyond their limits and didn't have an option to say, I'm all done.
Yeah.
And with them, they're supposed to know everything. They're supposed to be everything. They're supposed to be the caretakers. And so social workers, therapists, psychiatrists, like who do they go to? And if it's about something specific, right? Not long-term childhood ongoing stuff. If it's something specific about right now, like for example, the medical field during the pandemic or players with a career-ending injury, that's a specific focused goal. So that does fall more into the coaching than the mental health side of things. It embodies some mental health things. It embraces mental health things because it's going to cause a lot of different disruptions. But overall, it's all of it. It's looking at them as a whole person. And so that's kind of why I shifted into, we still have our group practice and I still see patients one-on-one in outpatient mental health. But I also wanted this other avenue where I could help people going through a singular transition or episode or incident under the coaching aspect without the stigma of the mental health and use my expertise to kind of shift back and forth.
And so like, to me, so like I'm so not a rules person, right? And so like you look at all the rules and the red tape of being in in that world. I mean, one, you have to get a degree, right? And just to be able to do these things, which, there's probably a reason for it. But there's documentation, there's all this stuff that goes into it. And does that prevent sometimes moving forward and actually treating the problem or actually treating the person?
So you mean as far as the therapy part?
Yeah.
So it creates like anything else, right? There's obstacle courses that we all have to jump through in life.
Yeah.
And so I think insurances and things like that, I don't think people understand when they say there's a mental health shortage. There's not a mental health shortage, but what there is, like we were trying to get credentialed with an insurance company. It's taken over a year to get credentialed. That's on them. Like we can't do anything. And we hear the frustration of people and we have amazing therapists that work for us. And, we hear their frustration and them saying, well, I've got this person who's been on the wait list for 4 months because they want to use their insurance and they really want to be seen. And we can't do anything because it's policy, it's procedure, it's things on the other end. And so I think it creates obstacles. I've also had people who have said, I want the best. You're the best at this. We're going to pay out of pocket because we know that it's going to be successful and we'll figure it out, right? We figure out how to do Christmas, or we figure out how to break money down this way. And it's worth it. And I think because of that, myself and our team, and we're all really goal focused. So I have been told, like, sometimes you're too good at your job, because I don't want people to be in therapy forever. It should be helpful and useful. And how do you know if you can do that if I'm seeing you taking on all your problems and giving you the rule book every day? Like if I see you once a week or twice a week and I'm giving you all the answers, you don't have the opportunity to figure it out by yourself. And so my model is like, let me give you the skills. If the skills I'm giving you aren't working, we need to find that out sooner rather than later so that we can move forward and really figure this out. And I think that also helps break the stigma of mental health where, you don't have people in therapy for 15 years. Some people need to be in therapy for 15 years. And that is okay. We all have different journeys, like we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
We have different journeys that shape us from birth. Embracing those and figuring it out. There's also, I've not been the right therapist for certain people. That's okay. I would much rather say, hey, I'm not the right person for you. Let me find the right person for you, because in creating that abundance piece, there's enough people to go around and help. And if I'm not helping the people who I'm best at helping, I'm doing them a disservice and I'm not going to find joy.
Yes.
And it's going to come across because I'm going to be worn out and tired, and they're going to leave every therapy session like, well, that was another hour of my life that I just paid for, and I'm not sure anything's going to change, right?
Yeah.
So, it's an interesting dynamic.
They're questioning, is it them?
Right.
They might be questioning, is it them?
Yeah.
Not whether, is this not a fit?
Right, exactly, because they don't know what mental health is supposed to look like. They don't know what therapy looks like, and that's what I'll tell people on the phone, like, hey, look, if you're looking for somebody who's going to be a best friend, I'm not it. I really love all the people that I work with. And I do, like, I can say that like wholeheartedly. Like I wake up in the morning and I'm excited about work.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love the families that I work with. I love the adults and professionals, but I'm always so excited when they're done, because I'm like, you did the work. You did it. I supported you, right? I gave you the water wings. I supported you in the process. But you did the work, and you should be really proud of that. And now you can go do this every day and not have it be baggage that you're carrying with you. And to me, that's amazing. Like I think about that. I'm like, how cool is that I get to do that?
You're empowering them.
Absolutely.
Like, I remember it was last year, I had this client that called me up, and like I could tell they had like this nervousness in their voice. And they're like, I think that we've accomplished everything, and we feel like we don't know. We just feel like there's this stuff that we got to go do, but we don't know if there's anything to do left in our sessions. And I was like, that's awesome. Like, that's great. I feel the same way. And he was like, so is it okay if we don't?
Yeah.
Move? And I was like, yeah, dude, like this is where we wanted. Like the goal was never for me to coach you for the rest of your business life. Like it was a short period of time to get you to where you wanted to go. In the fact that we're having this conversation now, I win, you win. Like we all win. Like you don't have to feel bad. This is not a breakup. Like and we accomplished what we wanted.
I think that's even more with coaching, right? Coaching is this like 24-week period.
Yeah.
Whereas therapy, tends to be 6 months, on average. I mean, I go pretty quickly from 1 week to 2 weeks and kind of spread out so that people can use the skills because we're all capable of handling so much. We just don't know how much we're capable if we're not pushed to do it because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, there are days I don't want to be pushed and I'm like, okay, let's go. But with coaching, it's different because it's so specific and so focused on what's going on and how to get through that. And that feels time limited, but it also feels kind of abrupt when it's done because it's like, all right, you good? We're good. All right. Have a good one. I'll see you later. Right.
Yeah.
I hope I don't talk to you again, but if you need anything, give me a call. Like I always feel weird about how to like end that. Right. Like good luck. I wish you all the best. Call me if you need me.
I'm so glad I'm not the only one because I've never had this conversation with anybody else. But it's like because you're so close with these people, right? Like you get so close, and then all of a sudden it's like bye.
Right?
And it's like there's a little bit of weirdness, right?
Yeah. Oh, and then they run into you in the grocery store.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll never forget. I was doing therapy with a family. I used to focus pretty much on kids. That's changed in the last few years, but. I'm working on behavior modification with this family and one of the kiddos, and I'm in with my 2 kids who at the time were like 2 and 3. They're 18 months apart. So, and they're like melting down and I'm like, okay, we're just going to get to the checkout. We're going to survive this. Like I'm using all of my coping skills and breathing and like distraction and like, oh, look at this, as I'm walking around, and they finally calm down right as we turn the corner, and I run into this family and I'm like, oh, hi. As, like my beautifully behaved children. Like, and it's so funny because there's this conflict all the time about self-disclosure. And I'm like, look, we are all in this together. We all have never been parents before. It's all our first times. We all are spouses for the first time at one point in time. And so like, let's just be honest that this stuff can be really hard.
Yeah.
And I've made mistakes too. And like I tell some of the families, I'm like, look, I just told you to do this and you're not going to get it perfect because I've said this to 6 families today. And yesterday I went down after doing therapy and talking about this all day. And I responded not okay with my own kids. So I apologized and we moved on, but you're not going to get it right all the time because you're human. And the more you know that that's okay, but we're real people, right? So we're out and I'm not always going to be perfect. Like I was telling you earlier, like I have a very expressive face. So like people have their own interpretations of what I'm thinking all the time. And I'm going to have an off day. I'm going to struggle. And sometimes I might run into you and you might say like, that's not what she told us to do. Yeah, I'm human. So I just make that like really clear up front, right? Like this is part of life.
It's the human experience, 1, and 2, it's part of what we're talking about, what you're talking about as far as the experiences that make up life. You can help people because you're going through the same thing, and you're not always perfect. You're going to have the same times they have.
Absolutely. And I think that it attracts more people than it detracts from my life. I've definitely had some pushback and I've definitely, been isolated because people feel like I'm too intense or too intimidating or whatever. But I really feel like it attracts the right people to my life and patients included, and coaching clients and other people because they know you get who I am. I'm authentic. I'm 100%. I just had a family member look at me and say, Tiffany, I love that you don't change. We always know what to expect. And I'm like, sorry? Like, thank you. I'm not sure how to take that, but it's true. Like I am who I am. And it's taken me a lot of hard work to figure that out. And, I have an amazing family and community behind me that is part of forming that. but it's also made me very unapologetic for people who don't welcome me in and don't reciprocate that, because I don't have time for that.
Because there's so many people.
Yeah.
Going back to the abundance, and this is, you said two key things in the last 10 minutes here that really tie together that I think any entrepreneur that's listening should really key into. One, there's an abundance. There's an abundance of people out there, and you don't have to sell all of them. You don't have to work with all of them, right? There's so many, and when you know that there are the people out there that fit with you, that you know you're going to work with the best, like, go focus on those people and be unapologetically you, because you're going to attract those people and you're going to repel the people that don't want to be around somebody like you, right?
Yeah. I have a t-shirt that says, "I'm not for everyone." just to make it clear up front. You know, it's funny. Everybody's shaped by their parents and family. And I think, you know, I'm so amazingly lucky for mine, but it's really funny because I think about some of the things that I do that are very genuine. Like, I went to this retreat and it was in Asheville, and we were going to all these different places, and they had like beer trucks and food trucks and all this great. And it was just kind of like a downtime after doing all of this kind of intense processing. And I bought the host a beer. Like, to me, that's just like a small, like, gratitude for like, thanks for showing up and giving me this opportunity. Here's this, right? Like, and he was so taken aback by it. And I think sometimes because I can come across as abrupt, or people use the word intimidating, which I don't get. I mean, maybe because I wear black all the time. I'm not sure. But,
it's like, the black. It's definitely the black. No.
Like, I am intense because I have a lot to do and a lot to say and a lot of things that I want to get accomplished in life. And there's very few hours. And in between that, I have to prioritize my kids and my family because they're most important to me. But like, so I come across intense, and I don't say anything if I don't have anything important to say, and I listen and I take in. But I have these really genuine moments that just come so naturally, and it always catches people off guard. And I'm like, so this is me being authentic. I don't need anything for it. Like, this is just me showing up, right? And it's a really interesting place, especially like going through this as an adult and watching my kids and trying to teach them what authentic means.
Yeah.
And also teaching them what abundance means, because I knew the concept, but not as a business owner until this conference that I went to in Hawaii, where it was like, I found this community of people who were like, oh, I know the perfect person for that. I don't want that because I'm not great at that, but let me get you to the right person. And then you watched everyone just kind of like settle in, and there wasn't any showboating because they all had something different to offer, right?
Yeah.
2 people can be teaching people how to do trainings, but it doesn't have to be in the same way. And so it's meant for 2 different people, right? And so this whole concept of there's all these people all over the world who are therapists who don't fit in the bubble, and are really proud of it. And I was like, yes, these are my people. And it felt great because I think about how many people they're helping, and, you know, that I'm looking at the map behind you and I'm like, yeah, I know people from all over the world who are doing this, you know, and helping people in a way that is like, hey, if we all lift each other up at the same time, we're all going to be ahead.
Yes.
Like, I don't have to push you away for me to get ahead, because there's space for all of us, especially if we're doing what
I don't have
we're really
to
good
climb
at.
over your back, right?
No, yeah.
It's so crazy. And like, I remember starting my business, and there was this gentleman that I was doing some work with, and we were doing some collaborations, and I was meeting and doing a lot of collaborations with a lot of other coaches and speakers. And this is how this all formed. This whole conversation piece, right? And I remember he said to me, I don't know why in the world you'd meet up with other coaches and consultants. He's like, I have no drive at all to have conversations with my competitors. He was like, you're the only person I'd ever talk to. He was like, you know, and like, but it's opened up the world to me.
Yeah.
I've been able to co-author a book. Been brought into so many different projects. Like, it's so been doing this, like, and being able to like kind of collaborate and be on other people's podcasts as well. It's just, there's so many opportunities that have opened up by having that. We can all, and it's been with other sales coaches, other people that do exactly what I do. And I've been able to recommend them. I've had one sales coach that actually contacted me because one of his clients needed somebody that one of my clients did. And so I was able to connect another sales coach's client with my client, and they got a killer client for them that they've had for 2 years now.
And it makes the world more personable, right? Like, now we're not just out there doing our own thing. Like, and that's what I say to people. I'm like, well, I like meeting other therapists because I need to know what they do and who to refer. Yes. I don't want to know what they do so I can know if I do it better. I want to know what they need to do, like what they enjoy doing, what's their passion, right? So that I can refer the right people to them. What is their expertise? Because especially when I was working in the adult and pediatric primary care, like I became really protective. Like these physicians and these families are trusting me with these other families, right? Like what to do. So I had lunch with other therapists. This was before I started the private practice, but I had lunch with them, and I still do. Like I still know, okay, eating disorder, this is who I'm sending it to. Like, and I am not afraid. I mean, we all have to pay our bills, right? Yeah. I said I was married to a teacher. But there's that piece. And I think entrepreneurs who are starting out fear that, right? And so they have this territorial thing of like, I can't give up that person, or I can't give up that sale because how am I going to pay my bills, right? That's going to pay this bill. And instead of thinking like that, thinking, okay, I'm not the right person, I'm going to be miserable. And so if I send them to the right person, we've now developed a relationship, but they're happy. And I have had people call me that said, hey, I got your name from this person. They went here for counseling, but they said you were so helpful. And so it always pays off, right? What goes around comes around. And I feel like the people who have been brought into my life over the last several years are there because I've adopted that mindset, right? I talk, I've done several talks about comparisonitis or toxic comparison, and switching that mindset from, I don't know why they have this and I don't, to they have this and it's possible for me. Yeah. I may have a different path to get there, but they did it. And so it's possible for me. And with sports and with business ownership and, all of these different things in life, careers, school, academics, whatever it is, like instead of us saying, well, I want what they want, switching and saying, if I want what they want, what kind of work did they put in to get there? Yeah. Right? Yep. And if I want what they want, am I willing to do the work? Yeah. Because that's a whole separate question.
There's a whole trade-off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what am I going to give up to get there? Because I know it's possible because they did it and I can do it. Right. And I think once you make that shift, it's like, it takes that fear and anxiety away of, well, they have family supporting them, or they have this, or they have that, right? We all have backstories that nobody else knows about. Yeah. Yep. And so it's easy to predict somebody's backstory and how they got where they are at, instead of just asking, hey, how did you do this? How did you get here? I'm struggling here. And if everybody had the abundance mindset, that person wouldn't have any problem saying, let's sit down and talk about this. And it's funny, I'm actually talking to a student at University of Michigan who wants to work with athletes. And I met him at this conference and I said, call me. Yeah. Even if you don't stick around and you don't want to do outpatient private practice, but you want to do this, let me sit down. I've been working for over 20 years in the mental health industry. Let me save you some time and at least give you what I've learned. Yeah. And then you can make the decisions about what you want to do. And it's like, if we all did that, how much different does things look, right? In our own lives, but also in the world.
In the world. Yeah. In the world. Yeah. You just look at those little inches moving and we're all helping people. And that's the world that I'm in. It's like, like let's help and empower each other. Right. Because one, you learn from other people as well. You're learning, and you're so right. These people will they will help you.
Yeah.
Like people, anybody I've ever asked, hey, what are you doing? I want to get there. They've sat down and given me the time, and vice versa. I've given time to anybody that's ever asked me.
Yeah. And I think the thing is that if they're not willing to, you're not in the right place.
You're not in the right place.
They're not the right person, right? Absolutely. And it took me a long time to learn. It wasn't me. I was just in the wrong room with the wrong people. And once I found the right people, it was like, oh.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to stay here for a while. This is good, right?
Yeah.
And that's with friendships, with my husband and I have a long backstory, but we knew each other before we were born. Our parents were really close friends. So we've literally known each other our whole lives, right? And so he's very much the same way. This is, if I'm in the right room with the right people, I don't have to be anybody I'm not.
Yes.
And I think about what that looks like. And sometimes I just look at him and I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure you're not going to just okay, nope, we're good. All right, just show up as you.
That terrifies people.
Yeah.
Terrifies people. But once you can do it, it's so absolutely freeing. There was one day I was literally going to go to a session in sweatpants, and my wife was like, "You're going to go out like that?" And I'm like, "They know me. I'm not really trying to impress them. They know who I am. They know me. It's one of those things." And it was, I did. But what am I going to? Why am I going to pretend like I'm somebody that I'm not? And it's just sweatpants is a bad example. But why am I going to pretend like I'm somebody I'm not? Because here's a good example. When I first started making content, I had a video, and at the end, I dropped an F-bomb, and this guy called me up and was like, "Hey, Jason, that was a great video. That was so awesome. I was so motivated by it. But at the end, you dropped this F-bomb, and you're better than that," and gave me this whole speech about how I need to clean this up because nobody's going to listen, blah, 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 blah. And I really took that to heart and I stopped, and I curbed that. And then one day it hit me if I don't act like how I'd act in a normal everyday life, when somebody meets me, they're going to be like, "Who the fuck is that?"
Absolutely. It's like when you were growing up and your mom's yelling at you and then the phone rings and she's like, "Hello." You're like, "What?
Who's this?"
You were just so mad at me 2 minutes ago. All right, I'm going to take this and exit, right? But I do think that's so true. And that's, again, it attracts the right people. And I think if there's a point to radical candor, right? There's a point to being candid that is too much, right? Yeah. We can't think everything we say. and part of that is not because it's wrong to do, but because the other person that you're interacting with has their own stuff going on, right? And so I always tell people text messages are the worst way outside of Facebook and emails to communicate something important, because you're relying on that person being in the right headspace at the right time.
Yes.
Right. And knowing where you're coming from and assuming that they haven't had anything go wrong in their day.
Yep.
And so hey, have you done this today? Could be very accusatory or shaming or whatever else. And so we didn't have as much of that before technology, right? And now everybody has, you put a post out there just thinking "Oh, hey, this is great," right? And you throw the post out there, and somebody on the other end of that could be having a really bad day and read it wrong and think it's about them. And then it leads to a bunch of other stuff. And we talk about mental health and social media and what that does to teenagers and other things, but that's really what it gets at, right? Everybody putting out their best side of things and their best days, and we interpret it.
Yeah.
We assume that that's, what it looks like. I said, it was much harder when we had regular pictures that we had to print off, because you had to go to their house and be handed this 20-pound photo album to look at all of their vacation moments, right? And you're like, "Oh, great. Mm-hmm. Five of you doing this, right?" And now we can edit and filter in a matter of seconds and whip it up without even thinking about the effect that it has. And there's a bunch of people out there who are TikTok therapists, as my patients tell me, hey, so I saw this TikTok therapist doing this. And I was like, uh-huh. And what is their training and what is their licensing and why were you looking that up? Right. It's like those quizzes that they have online, to self-diagnose yourself with 18 different things. But I think it is so important, the communication piece and connection piece and all of that, because if not, we end up just judging, right? Like you could have hit that person on the wrong day.
For sure. Yeah.
And they could have watched it 5 days later and never thought anything about it.
Completely
but
different.
they were having a day and they decided to reach out to you, and it was probably with your best interest. They probably cared about you. It wasn't judgmental or wasn't meant to be judgmental, but then you did that mental dance with yourself, right? And it took you a while to get back. And I think, we all do that in different ways. And that's when I say, like, everyone struggles with mental health. That was a mental health struggle. Like, it wasn't a big one, right? As far as it didn't last forever. It didn't keep you from showing up to work. You kept doing what you were doing. But it definitely changed how you did things for a short period of time. And so it, like, getting in the car and driving for some people is anxiety producing.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. And like one of the quickest things I learned in leadership is don't text.
Yeah.
Like the texting, like having a conversation you should have one-on-one, correcting somebody, like having to not discipline.
Yeah.
I hate the word discipline, but like correct somebody or like point out an opportunity, however you want to phrase it. A growth opportunity, however you want to phrase it, package it up. Anyways, you can't do that over text or over email. And most leaders want to do it that way because they think it avoids the pain.
Yeah.
They think it avoids that confrontation of the quick conversation or the conversation, but it creates so much more pain because that person reads it a certain way. And depending on where they are, if they're in a negative headspace, now it makes it now they're deep because they read it in a negative headspace. Right. Now they're even more mad and upset. And guess what? They don't want to communicate to you about it either because they don't want to talk about it. So you guys go for like 2 weeks not confronting about it.
Yep.
And then one day somebody doesn't throw their garbage away in the trash can and somebody blows up on somebody, and like it's like this whole download of the stuff, this festering that you've been harboring.
Absolutely. And it's just, it's not having the space to have those conversations. But the other thing that's missed, there's one thing with facial cues and nonverbal stuff that people miss out on when they don't have those conversations in person. But the other thing is, and I think this is a hard one, is that even just by picking up the phone and saying, hey, do you have a second? It gives that person an opportunity to say, you know what? My kid's throwing up all over in the back of the car. Yes. Can I call you back? Yep. Right?
Yep.
And so now you know where they're at in their head and you can tailor the conversation. You can still have that hard conversation and also be empathetic to the fact that they have a kid who's sick and they're struggling and it's a rough day for them.
Yeah.
Because you cared enough to call and ask, hey, do you have a minute? Right? Yeah. Like I was thinking about this earlier today. I was talking to somebody and I said, how can I help? Like it was this simple, genuine, how can I help? Because that person was struggling with things that were day-to-day life stuff, right? It wasn't anything I could fix. It wasn't anything my therapy brain could fix. And it was real life. And instead of trying to fix it, I just said, how can I help? And she said, well, you can't. And I said, okay, are you sure? And she goes, well, I mean, I feel better just by talking about it. And I think what I'm trying to get to is what needs to happen next. Uh-huh. So let me talk about why I'm struggling with that. So all I did was say, how can I help?
Yep. Yeah.
Super secret therapist trick.
So yeah, therapy and coaching is sometimes just a question to help them uncover what they already know.
Right.
Yeah.
But it made her pause and think, but it wasn't me trying to fix it for her. Right. And so I think by taking that opportunity, which this is something I learned from my parents because they've owned their own business my whole life. And they've had people who have worked for them their entire careers and have retired. And my brother works with them and they have some amazing staff. But, I remember delivering Christmas presents to customers with my dad 2 days before Christmas. And we'd go out in the snow and I'd help him and things like that. And I think that authenticity, but also he knew them. He knew their families. He knew what they were going through. And with his staff and employees, their staff and employees, they know them. And so it creates a different environment. I look at some of the big companies who don't have that opportunity because they're international or because of other things. And I think sometimes that's the piece, the culture piece that's missing.
Yeah.
And I think that's where having those hard conversations about if your employees can't come to you and tell you they're struggling with something, why?
Yeah.
The question isn't about them and what's going on. It's why do you have a culture where you can't talk about mental health? And I laugh because I was talking to a group of women entrepreneurs and they said, well, you've done all these trainings for all these companies about mental health and wellness and taking care of yourself. How many of the corporate leadership level makes time in their schedule? And I said, well, a lot of them want to. Right. And it's not that they don't want to change, but if you have a budget meeting or a meeting about mental health and burnout, I would guarantee 99.9% of them are going to take the budget meeting because they have to pay their employees. And that is part of it. Right. But when you look at those small things and retention, like we're going through this whole thing where people can't, what's missing, right? And that's the piece of kind of bringing it back around and saying, how do you address that, right? Like, how do you bring that culture and make those culture shifts? So, and I think a big way is by not texting, by not just shooting off an email and by having the conversations. Just by doing that, a lot of the companies that I talk to and do trainings with, I'll say making 5 minutes to have that phone call is better than spending 2 hours with HR figuring it out later.
It's a huge thing. And it's communication, but it's communication, understanding that your people are people.
Yeah.
They're not objects. And I think that's a really, really hard piece. And we talked about it with athletes, like they're a performer, right?
Yeah.
You look at it and I've watched it, listen to when people, adults yell at middle school kids, like basketball, football, like, what you're yelling at these kids is just insane. Like, they're not going to catch the ball every time. They're going to make mistakes.
Right.
Like, as adults, you look at the professionals that do this every day and get paid millions of dollars to do it. They're missing free throws. They're dropping passes.
Absolutely.
Like, they're making mistakes. They're jumping off sides, and you're yelling at a kid. But when you have those pressures put on you,
Yeah. Well, and you know that they're there too, right? And you know that these 500 employees, if you don't get their paycheck to them, they may lose their house, right? Like they're so, and to think about all that pressure buildup of what that looks like as we have a small group practice and I think about it all the time, right? Making sure that everybody's not only able to pay their bills, but also are they happy doing, right? Because that's my thing.
Yeah.
But it's funny that you say that about sports because I go to Michigan games and I don't know, forever when I hear grown men standing in the stands screaming at the top of their lungs at these 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, I turn around, look at them and I'm like, oh, so where did you play college ball? And I think it's particularly sensitive to me because I did play college soccer and, I have this experience and I work with athletes, but you look at every aspect of their life is under a microscope and you look at I'll take Coach Harbaugh, right?
Yeah.
I heard the things people were saying, right? He's got a family. Like, if I'm hearing those things,
His family's hearing those
his
things.
family's
Yeah.
like the damage that we do when we don't see people as people.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, he is a human being.
Yes.
And he is, I don't know him, but like, he's a good person,
Yeah.
you know, and he
Yep.
he wants to succeed. But he's this person in this role, and you look at the players on the team and how they form over the years, and it becomes about, are they good enough to be on the team, right? Whether it's Michigan, Michigan State, whatever.
Yep.
Whatever. Are they good enough to be on the team? Are they good enough to be starters? It's never good enough, right? Because then if they're good, by sophomore year, they're talking about recruitment and professionals and then it's what round of the draft pick. And then you watch every year those poor young men, if they're supposed to go first round and it's getting close to the end, their face and just the shame and anguish, and they're looking around at their families, and you can just tell. And it's, when you have athletes like that, or you have business owners, it's not a singular thing, right? Like, their family has supported them. Their friends have supported them. They have their community who have all given up at some point, right? Even if it's just like happy hour with friends. My friends, I've definitely given up things that I would like to be at for work because it's what I need to do, not necessarily what I want to do, right? I have that conversation with my kids a lot. You have to do the have tos before the want tos, right? Yeah. And I think that's true. But you know, it goes down to, my son played football last year as an 8-year-old, and they're cute little, and he played it. He played it as a 9-year-old, and he had 2 different coaches. And the development in him as a human with his coach this year and the coaching team, who from day one talked about it as a family. You take care of your family members. If they're having a bad day, you encourage them and support them and do all of this stuff. And I think if we can shift culture everywhere, right? Going back to what we talked about at the beginning, abundance, people doing what they're happy doing, being willing to help each other out, that starts changing in any environment, right? If I'm miserable at my job, and I told my husband this 15 years ago when we were getting married, I said, if you're miserable at your job and you're working your job 8 to 10 hours a day, I only get 2 to 3 hours of your time. You're going to be miserable when you come home. Absolutely. And I don't want to be married to somebody who's miserable all the time. So go find a job that you love and work really hard at it. And there's going to be hard days, but you have to be passionate about what you're doing, you know. And I always knew what I was going to do. I was just one of those people who just like had this path, and so I didn't have that struggle, right? And I was also younger when I decided on it, and kind of kept pushing. But he was thinking family support. He had just come out of the Army. Like, he was thinking, like, how am I going to support a family and teacher's salary, right? And I said, well, figure it out. But I definitely don't want you to be a stockbroker, because you will be miserable. and there are people who are made for that job, right? And so those people need to go do that job. I never need to be a financial planner, because I would be horribly miserable, which then affects everything in my life. And I think that's really where, even though the saying's been around forever, right? Do what you love. It's true, but you're still going to have to work at it. Like, I feel like that part needs to be underneath it, right? Like, it's still going to be hard work.
Still working. There's still things you have to do that you don't enjoy to make that successful.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. We were talking about this before we started recording. I think this is the perfect time to kind of segue into it, because I think it's awesome, because it's like, do what you love. There's so many things that you knew you were going to be in behavioral health, and you knew you're going to be a therapist for a long time.
Yeah. I knew I wanted to work with people. And I always found it really intriguing the way people's brains worked. Like, why something would happen to somebody, and somebody chooses this path and somebody responds to it differently, right? Because of the way, like, so that always intrigued me. And then I was actually in high school told I wasn't smart enough to take psychology. And so I was like, oh, let me show you. I'm like, really? We couldn't have picked any other field.
Anything else.
But I just was. And then I started, my dad was very smart, and him and my mom, encouraged me to have summer jobs and internships. And so my mom and my dad are like the epitome of self-made and hard work. And so they said, make sure you're figuring it out first.
Yeah.
And so I went and did all these things, and it was so natural to me. Right. And it was just like, oh yeah, this makes sense to me. And so it was work. Obviously I went to grad school, I did all the stuff. Right. But like, it was work that drove me to keep knowing more and learning more and doing more. And it drove, I hated school. I was terrible at it. That's why I won't go get my PhD, but, I wasn't good at it. And so to think of myself in a position where I'm still like have a laundry list of books that I'm dying to read shows that I'm in the right path, because I continue to want to learn more.
Yeah. But so like there's this inside of the box way of going about what you're doing, and then kind of discovering, and this is what we were talking about, is there's so many ways to do your path. There's so many, you don't have to be just one thing. You don't have to be just a therapist. You can go and be a coach. You can go be a speaker. You can own a different kind of business. You can, you don't have to be one thing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is, I hope it's shifting. My mom she co-owns the business with my dad, and that's what we knew. But we would also go to the morgue with her, because she did dead people's hair when we were little, on the side, right? Because you're starting a business, you need to have income and other stuff. And so, I saw her doing multiple things all the time. And it's funny because she'll always say, well, I didn't have a college degree. And I'm like, you're one of the most successful, smartest people. Like, both of my parents are so incredibly smart, but they did it in a way where they were driven and passionate and had a good work ethic. My grandfather was incredibly smart as well, and had all these gadgets and was always like figuring out some way to do things. And I'm like, I wonder what we're going to do as a society and as a world when we stop having people, right, who are willing to think about things outside of the box and just go for their career, right? Whether it's trade school or whether it is, college degree, or what happens when everybody's so specialized that they're only willing to do what's in the box. Like, where does all that innovation and change come from? And I think that's where pushing to say, like we were talking about, from the time you're in kindergarten and they have career day.
Yes.
They don't let you wear many hats.
No. And the thing is like you're very limited. You can be a cop, a fireman, a nurse, a doctor, a professional athlete. Yeah. What else is there? There's
the president, I think, is always one. Who wants that job? Like, oh my gosh.
A teacher,
right?
You're very limited on the amount of careers that you can be.
Yeah.
And most of those things are very low paying. They're very like in the box. Nobody wants to do most of those things.
Right.
Or there's like the 1 in a million, you can be the president or professional athlete. Right. Like we spend so much time as a society, and I get it. And you're an athlete, and I love sports. We spend so much time as a society dwelling on being a professional athlete. And most likely, you're never going to be a professional athlete.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing is, I wanted to go to the Olympics as a swimmer, and dislocated my shoulder when I was young. And I watched a friend she was a runner up. And I think that's where, for me, that comparisonitis, like, that was the first time I ever looked at her and said, it's possible. Like, she swims in the lane next to me. Like, and this was when I was like 12 or 13, like, she swims in the lane next to me, and she's amazing. And she's this like amazing human being, but she's also human. Right. And so, I think it's one of the things that we talk about, those events shaping us, that is one of the things. And I think if we start telling kids at a young enough age, you don't have to be just one thing, right? Yeah. Like, you can be many things throughout your life. And, I don't even know if you know this, I had a photography company for many years.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So, like, I think I've been a wilderness therapist. I worked at an Aboriginal police force when I was in Australia. I've been a photographer. Like, I've done all of these things. And I'm still me, and I'm a better me because of it. And so imagine if, which I give credit to my parents, and my brother, like they never said you had to be this, but they said, figure it out.
Yes.
Right. Like figure it out and go see that, go do that, go check that out. And they never held me back from doing that. And so I look at, how we talk about it now, and I look at my own kids and say, okay, what do you want to do? Not who do you want to be? What do you want to do with your life, right?
Yeah.
My daughter wants to live in Hawaii because we went there last summer, and she wants to have a tiny house with a big barn for all of her surfboards. I'm like, awesome. Can I have a little tiny room up on top of the barn, right? But
awesome.
I don't ever tell her no.
Yeah.
Great. Let's figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah.
And so I think we are so captured by society in the box that it puts around us and how people look at us. And I fall victim to this too, of getting judgments and stares and other things. Like you make yourself small so that you're not put out there and judged, or have people shame you, or have people like just give you their experience and how negative it was with somebody in your profession, which I'm sure you've run into this too, right?
Absolutely.
Like I had this therapist who was awful, and like it made things so much worse. And I'm like, I'm so sorry you had that experience. Can we talk about how to make that next experience better, different, right? Like how do we shift that focus, because it's clearly still affecting you. But, once I kind of found myself in this place of abundance, and that's with my friend groups too. Like I have these amazing, amazing supportive friends. I didn't feel like I needed to be in that box anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I need to like apologize for who I am. It definitely causes me extra grief at times. But I can sleep at night, and I can sleep every night, and I can look at my kids and say, here's why mom did this. And I'm sorry that so-and-so doesn't invite you to their birthday party because mom feels differently than they do. But this is who I am, and I'm not going to continue to change who I am for other people's expectation. And I'm hoping, right, that trickles down to them over time so that they don't feel the need to put themselves in a box.
Yeah, exactly. And I've shared this story a couple of times on this show, but when getting out of high school, coming out of high school, I wanted to either be a therapist or I wanted to be a sports journalist. Well,
you're kind of teetering that balance,
right? And that's my whole point. Is like that's where I'm at. And like I didn't take the route of going to school because I was super poor and I had to pay my own way through college. And when I saw how long you had to go to school to become to go into therapy, and like I don't have that much money or patience to go through that. And I didn't love school either, so it's like that's a lot. And so I'll probably not do that. I'll go into sports journalism, and then I ended up never finishing school. I went into sales. But now you come full circle, and literally I'm in the content journalism. Like this is what are we doing right now, right? But then most of my work is in that headspace therapy, and I want to be a therapist because therapy impacted my life. I grew up with an abusive dad. We had all these different things, and so in middle school, my mom took me to a therapist, and having that person to go talk to and be comfortable with and open up my feelings. Like that's what drove me to want to help other people, is because I wanted to be able to give back to the other people that were like me. I wanted to help other people that were going through the same experiences that I did. And now I'm doing the same thing, but it wasn't in what I had thought it was. I'm just helping people become better at sales and better at business because I went through those same experiences and challenges. Yeah. And I'm just helping them go through that mental hurdle and overcome those mental blocks that they have that are keeping them from where they want to be.
Yeah. And I think that, I'm so glad you had a good experience, because I think that there's a lot of people who don't have a good experience with it. But, I do think that what shapes us over time, right, is who we want to be. Like for me, I always wanted to work with athletes, but when I was going to grad school, there wasn't therapy. Right? There wasn't mental health for athletes. That wasn't an okay thing to talk about. I was kind of shocked, and I shouldn't be, but I was kind of shocked. U of M did this Sack the Stigma this year. They did t-shirts and a whole thing on mental health. And I give them a ton of credit because it's still something that's breaking through. There's a big push for it. There's people doing really amazing things. I was just at a conference at the NCAA. They are doing all kinds of research, right? Like all these universities from all over the country are doing all of this research on how mental health impacts things. And shift that to what I already knew, how sports impacts the way you handle diversity and grit and endurance. There are things you put up with on a team that you wouldn't put up with if you didn't have to.
Yeah.
Personalities, right? Like I think about my teammates and my coaches and I'm like, yeah, that was preparing me for the skills I needed for my boss who was emotionally abusive and just a horrible person to work for. I had a coach who talked to me like that too. How did I handle that? Right. And I reached back and you can pull those things forward. And I think whether your kid is an athlete or not, finding a team of something where they can fail, right? I was so excited for my daughter to get disqualified at a swim meet, which sounds horrible.
Yeah.
But she is a perfectionist. And I wanted her to know the world was not going to end if she got disqualified. It wasn't a big deal because it's made out to be this big deal. It happens all the time. It happens to the best swimmers. I mean, there's been Olympians who've been disqualified and like talk about the time to not get disqualified.
Oh my God.
But the nerves
all
get
your
to
time.
you. Right.
Getting to that point.
One shot
Yeah.
to do it, and I wanted her to learn that at a young enough age that she could then show up the next time and say, I know what that feels like. And I'm still here and showing up. And I think that's where, for me, whether it's a team at work, right? Whether it's a team at school, I do Lego club at our school. They're working together in pairs. They're teaming up to do this, and they don't always get along, right? Last week I had somebody say they're not building it the way that I want to, and I'm like, okay, good. Let's figure it out, right? But find a way to be part of a team and not just show up, but if you are there and you're really there and in it, you will learn so much and become a better person for it because there's diversity everywhere in life and not everybody's going to like you, even if you're Mary Poppins, right?
Yes. You start to realize and recognize what your skills and abilities are. You become real with where you're at, right? You become coachable because you're used to being coached.
Yeah.
You're used to getting hard feedback.
And letting and giving up somebody else the spotlight.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
My son's a very good football player. This year, because of the team and because he liked his teammates, he was excited when other people succeeded. There was a kid who caught a long pass. He talked about it for 3 or 4 days. It wasn't him. He loved to be a wide receiver. It wasn't him who caught the pass. But he was excited for this other kid who didn't get to play as much because it was his first year and he's a year younger. And he got the pass. And they were all screaming and cheering. And it's awesome. That's how you grow into a good human and be there know how to show up.
Yeah.
And when to step back so that somebody else can shine. Because, we talk about leadership and corporations and business owners. They have to do that every single day. They have to know when to step in and when to step out and let somebody else shine and when to hand that baton off to somebody else to say, my plate's too full. I need you to do that. And we haven't done well as a society, which is why burnout is a big thing right now. We have not done well talking about that. If it's okay, you can still be the boss. You can still be an amazing leader and hand the baton off to somebody else who's got the capacity and space and energy to do it. And that person might be 20 years younger than you, and it's going to hurt for a little bit, but you'll be excited about it when you can go home and have dinner with your family.
You know what? And again, it goes back to what you talk about being an empowerer.
Yeah.
And, is if you're developing a team and you can hand that baton off and watch one of your leaders under you take the meeting over and do a good job with it, that feels so good. And I've watched it happen in so many occasions. And it's like your son talking about the kid that caught the pass and like he's raving about it for 3 weeks. I've raved about the times that people took over the meetings and I've watched it happen, and I've watched their development from being that shy person, the person that felt like they could never lead that meeting, to being the person that's leading that meeting. That felt better than if I had a kick-ass meeting.
Absolutely. I mean, I could talk about that forever, because I think that's one of the things when I go and talk to companies, that's what when I go, they bring me in under burnout. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me all the things that you're doing.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I don't want to put that on this person's plate. And I'm like, so you're burning yourself out. You're robbing them of an opportunity to feel success and useful and good.
Yep.
And you're doing it at the cost of missing dinner with your spouse. You're doing it at the cost of missing your buddy's retirement party or bachelor party or whatever stage of life you're in. So you have this extra cost that you are just looking at as part of the cost of running a business and being an owner. But you're not looking at the cost of this employee. Job satisfaction, empowerment, opportunity. Even if they don't get it perfect, what does that look like to encourage them from where they're at, right? And I always tell people, like, working with kids with anxiety, until you push them, you don't know what they're capable of. Because as humans, we're all capable of more than we think we are capable of. And we don't know until we're pushed into that position and into that corner. Like, I always knew I wanted to own my own company. I didn't know that I'd own 3. But I saw the need, and I decided to go there because I wanted to remove that barrier for it. And luckily with the group practice, I have an amazing partner, and she's good at the things that I'm not good at.
Yeah.
She calls the insurance companies. She's much nicer at it than I am, because she's got so much more patience, right?
Yeah.
And I'm good at things that she's not good at. And we are lucky because we found the perfect pair.
Yeah.
And then we have 3 therapists who have their unique specialties. And I'm thrilled when I can hand them off something, or I'll say, oh, do you want this? How can I support you in doing that? And we hired an administrative assistant, and she's good at the things that Becky and I aren't good at, right? Like, she loves Excel and spreadsheets and all of that stuff. And I'm like, thank you. Because now I'm not taking that on. And now, instead of being attached to my phone, she's attached to her phone. No, I'm just kidding. Like, I can set it down, and I lose both my phones at times, because I'll set them down in the kitchen and I'll get to playing with my family or doing something with them and paying attention to them. And I'm so in the moment that then, like, I'll have to go leave or go do something, and I'll be like, where's my phone? I don't know what I did with it.
It's a great feeling to have.
Yeah. And I say that all the time. Like, I wish more people had that opportunity as business owners to gift their employees the opportunity to excel in something and be the most amazing at what they can. And sometimes that's not something that they knew before, but also they've done a ton of research that when you do that and you empower your staff and you put them in a position where they're their best, they will excel, which then makes the company excel, and they'll stay longer. Right.
Yeah. To wrap this up, and this is a perfect story to bring this story home. One of my clients, there's a operations director, and he did not delegate. He took on everything, and he didn't want to add things to people's plate, right? And so this one week, he had to take the week off to take care of his wife because she was sick, and so he took the week off. And guess what? Deliveries and things still need to happen, and nobody there knew what to do.
Yep.
And so everybody was kind of running around, and his thing was like, well, I tried to get everything done Friday that I possibly could, but the week, there's a new week and there's new things to do. And so he ended up quitting. He ended up leaving because he realized that wasn't the right person. He wasn't the right person. He can't put process in place. He wasn't the right person to be in that place. I was down there a few weeks ago, and this gentleman got a new job, and he happened to come in, and I was having a conversation with him, and he was telling me the story. He was like, "Oh, I started a new job today," and I was like, is this different than the job that you left for a few weeks ago? And he was like, yeah. And he was like, you didn't hear what happened? And I was like, no. And he was like, yeah, I started working there. He was like, and nobody would teach me anything. He was like, they were all running around and they were staying busy. And he was like, and they were doing things and they were kind of running behind. He was like, but I don't just stand around. He's like, I don't clock in anywhere to just stand around and watch stuff. He was like, it was extremely boring. I was extremely frustrated. He was like, and when I kept asking to learn stuff, they were just like, oh, we don't have time to teach you.
Yeah.
And so I quit. And I was like, huh. So like, you like it when people teach you how to do things. He's like, yeah. And I'm like, and you like it when you have responsibility and you can get things done. You don't have to rely on the boss to do it. And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, man, this is a good lesson to learn. I'm like, I don't know if you realize this, but like in leadership, you have to do that. Like, and and now you know what it's like on that other end to not have somebody tell you or prepare you how to do your job.
Yeah.
Right. And like, because everybody wants to have a direction. Everybody wants to know nobody wants to show up to work and be bad. Nobody wants to show up to work. Like you said,
right.
You work more than you're at home sometimes.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to show up and feel like, how do I measure today? Did I just show up? Did I make it happen? How do I know if I'm successful?
Absolutely. And I think that is the thing. And I think it does help. My dad's pulled wire. He's an electrical contractor. He's pulled wire. He's worked at the corporate level. He's done all of the things.
Yeah.
And so when he's asking somebody to do something, he knows what he's asking them. And my mom, the same thing with the office, and my brother, the same thing. And so I think that's where, when you do it yourself first, it's so funny because you're talking about that guy, and in my head, I'm like, wow, he should have gone to HR and said, hey, it seems like you need a training coordinator and I can be really good at that, right? Like shift the perspective, but sorry, shiny object. But, I think that is our ability to adapt and reframe what's going on in our lives to make the most of it. I mean, I'm glad he didn't stay in that because he would have been, it would have been hard.
Oh,
right?
It was hard.
And that leads
absolutely.
to other things. Yeah. And so, I'm super grateful that I've found this path early on and have never hesitated to take a veer here or there, and found the people that make it work. But, now I'm finding community. I get to go on podcasts. I get to talk about mental health. I get to help kind of remove that stigma. But I also have kind of, through that process, diversified and learned other ways to support people. I never thought I would be doing, corporate trainings via Zoom during COVID. Like, I don't know that I ever thought I would be doing that, but I think about the world and how it works. And when you're willing to say yes and put yourself out there, and you're willing to not be jealous of somebody else who's doing what you're doing, it opens so many doors, because then people want to bring you in and say, hey, this is pretty amazing. And I'm always game for talking about mental health, because I think that the wrong people are talking about it. I think that the people, like any experience, right?
Yeah.
I know you're a Lions fan, so like everybody's ready to talk about the Lions when they're doing bad, right?
Yeah.
But yesterday everybody was real silent when they were doing good, right? And so I think that's where everybody's willing to put in a complaint. And when you're talking about somebody's mental health, that goes a long way. And if we realize like therapy doesn't have to be a whole lifelong process, or nobody, like I can't prescribe meds. So I always tell people that up front, like, I can't prescribe meds. I'm just a social worker. And they're like, oh, okay. Because I think that is the stigma. Like, if I have anxiety and I go talk about it, they're going to want me to do all these things and take all these meds. And so I think it's good to have these opportunities where the door is open to different things. So, and I know a lot of people have talked about it on your podcast in different ways. So yeah.
Tiffany, that's an awesome way to end it. Thank you so much for coming down and having this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.